The Deadline. Part 1. The Discovery. In a city full of busy streets, tall buildings, and bright lights, there was a journalist named Maria. Maria loved her job because she enjoyed finding out the truth and telling people stories. She had spent years working at a big newspaper, always searching for exciting stories that would surprise her readers. But lately, she felt that her work was no longer special. She wanted something more, something big, something that could change the world. One rainy evening, Maria was walking home after a long day at work. She took a different route, hoping to clear her mind. As she walked, she noticed an old bookstore tucked away on a quiet street. The store looked strange and a little spooky, but Maria felt an urge to go inside. She had always loved books, and maybe this place would lift her spirits. The bookstore was empty and dimly lit, with shelves packed full of dusty old books. The air smelled of old paper and wood. As Maria walked through the narrow aisles, she spotted a section labeled Secrets of Life. Curious, she walked over and picked up a thick, leather-bound book that had no title on its cover. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The old shopkeeper, a quiet man with white hair and glasses, suddenly appeared beside her. He looked at her with a serious expression and whispered, "That's a special book. Are you sure you want to read it?" Maria was surprised by his words, but she nodded. She was a journalist, after all, and if there was a secret hidden in this book, she wanted to find it. She paid for the book and left the store, feeling both excited and nervous. When she got home, Maria sat at her desk and opened the book. Inside, there were pages filled with names, dates, and events. It looked like some kind of record of people's lives. As she flipped through the pages, she found her own name written there. Her heart skipped a beat as she read about her life, her childhood, her friends, her career as a journalist. Everything was written down, word for word. Then, she saw something even stranger. The book didn't just contain her past. It also showed her future. Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. She wanted to close the book, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She kept reading and discovered details about things that hadn't happened yet. There was a section about a huge story she would uncover, something that would change her life forever. She couldn't believe it. This book knew her future, and it was written down, clear as day. As she read more, she felt both excited and scared. Part of her wanted to read every single detail, but another part of her was afraid. Was it wise to know everything about her future? What if she didn't like what she found? Maria decided to test the book. She looked up her best friend, Lila, in the book and found Lila's story. It was all there. Her life, her family, her job. Maria was amazed. The book seemed to know everything about everyone. But there was a warning written in small, faded letters at the bottom of Lila's page. Every time you read someone's future, their story will change. Maria ignored the warning and continued to read. She discovered something surprising about Lila's future. It mentioned a sudden job offer in another city, which Lila had never mentioned before. Maria felt a strange excitement, knowing something her friend didn't. The next day, she couldn't wait to talk to Lila about it. When they met, Maria casually asked if Lila had any plans to move. Lila laughed and said no. She loved her job and wasn't planning to leave. But 2 weeks later, Lila got a job offer in a faraway city, just like the book had said. She was excited about it and decided to move. This shocked Maria. It seemed like the book wasn't just telling the future. It was making it happen. Lila's life had changed exactly as the book predicted, and it was because Maria had read about it. This was both amazing and terrifying. As days went by, Maria couldn't resist the urge to keep reading the book. She looked up other people she knew and read their futures. She found details about her family, her coworkers, even her boss. She kept seeing the same warning at the bottom of each page. Every time you read someone's future, their story will change. Maria thought the warning was strange, but she didn't take it seriously. She enjoyed knowing things no one else knew. She felt powerful, like she had control over people's lives. But soon, she began to notice something odd. The more she read about people's futures, the darker their stories became. Lila, who had been so happy about her new job, started feeling lonely in her new city. Another friend, who was once cheerful, became distant and sad after Maria read their future. It was as if the book's predictions were coming true, but in a twisted way. Maria was beginning to understand the warning. Every time she read a person's future, the ending of their story changed, and not for the better. It seemed that her curiosity was causing harm. But even with this realization, she couldn't stop herself. She felt trapped by the power of the book. She wanted to know more, to understand everything. One night, she decided to look up her own future again, hoping to find something positive. But the book showed her something terrible, a future filled with sadness and regret. She would become isolated, losing the people she cared about. It was all because of the book, the lives she had tampered with, and the harm she had caused by changing people's futures. For the first time, Maria was truly afraid. She realized that this book, which she thought was a gift, might actually be a curse. She didn't know what to do. Should she stop reading it, or was it already too late to fix what she had done? As she closed the book, she felt a sense of dread growing inside her. She had discovered something powerful, something no one else knew. But now, she wasn't sure if it was worth the cost. And so, Maria faced a terrible choice. Keep the book and continue reading, knowing it would change people's lives for the worse, or stop reading and live with the mystery. Either way, her life was now different, and there was no turning back. Part 2. The Obsession. Days turned into weeks, and Maria found herself haunted by the book. It sat on her desk, closed but never forgotten, as if it were waiting for her. She tried to focus on her regular work at the newspaper, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had been forever altered by what she had seen inside those pages. She told herself she wouldn't open it again, that she didn't need to know anyone else's future. But the urge to open the book, to peek just one more time, grew stronger every day. One evening, after a particularly long day, Maria gave in to her curiosity again. She convinced herself that reading the book wouldn't harm anyone if she was careful. Maybe she could learn something useful, she thought. Perhaps she could even help someone if she read just a little more. This time, she decided to look up her colleague, James. James was a talented journalist with a kind heart, and Maria respected him. She thought of him as a friend, though they were not very close. When she opened the book to James's page, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. She wanted to know what lay ahead for him, thinking maybe she could warn him if there was any trouble in his future. As she read, Maria felt a mix of excitement and fear. James's future seemed bright. He would receive an award for his reporting, and he would write a book that would become very popular. His life was full of success and happiness. But at the bottom of the page, she saw the warning again. Every time you read someone's future, their story will change. Maria hesitated. She didn't want to hurt James. But she thought, what's the harm in knowing? Maybe the warning didn't mean anything, she told herself. Maybe she could know his future without changing it. She closed the book, feeling a mix of guilt and curiosity. She decided she would keep an eye on James and see if his life followed the path the book had predicted. The next morning, Maria went to work as usual, but something felt different. James looked unusually tired and stressed, and he seemed to be distracted. She noticed that he wasn't working on his usual stories, and he seemed distant. When she asked him if everything was okay, he smiled politely but didn't give her a clear answer. A few days later, she heard some surprising news. James had been passed over for a promotion he had been hoping for. Instead of the success and joy that the book had promised, his life seemed to be taking a darker turn. He started working late nights, and rumors around the office suggested that he was having trouble with his job. Maria felt a chill go down her spine. The book's warning was real. She had read James's future, and now his life was changing for the worse. Maria felt guilty and scared. She had thought she was being careful, but her actions had affected James's life. She wanted to tell him the truth about the book, but she knew he wouldn't believe her. Who would believe such a strange story? Determined to fix things, Maria decided to test the book again, hoping that she could find a way to reverse the changes. She decided to look up her editor, Mr. Reed, a man known for his strict rules and sharp mind. Maybe if she read his future, she could learn something that would help her undo the damage she had done to James. She opened the book to Mr. Reed's page. His future was just as impressive as James's had been. He would lead the newspaper to great success, win awards, and retire with honor. But Maria couldn't ignore the warning at the bottom of his page. She knew that reading his future would change it, but she felt desperate. She thought, what if knowing his future could somehow help James? After reading, she closed the book and waited. The next day, however, the office was buzzing with surprising news. Mr. Reed had announced that he would be leaving the newspaper due to personal reasons. No one knew why, but it was clear he wouldn't be staying. His future had changed just like James's, and Maria knew it was because of her. Now, Maria was even more trapped than before. The book had changed the lives of not just one person, but two. She had hoped to help, but instead, she had caused more trouble. Her guilt grew, and she felt like she was carrying a heavy secret that was eating away at her. Yet, despite the harm she had done, Maria still couldn't stop herself. The book's power was like a pull she couldn't resist. She had to know more, even if it meant causing more harm. In the weeks that followed, Maria became obsessed with the book. She would stay up late, reading about the futures of strangers and acquaintances alike. Each time she read a person's future, their life would change, and the ending would always be darker, filled with sadness or misfortune. The changes were subtle at first. A small argument, a missed opportunity. But over time, these changes added up, twisting people's lives into something bleak. Maria's world became one of secrets and shadows. She was the only one who knew why these changes were happening, and she could tell no one. She became isolated, as if the weight of the book was creating a wall between her and everyone else. She stopped meeting friends, she avoided family gatherings, and she rarely spoke to her colleagues outside of work. One night, unable to sleep, Maria looked at her own page in the book again. The future it showed was now even worse than before. She saw herself alone, filled with regret, surrounded by darkness. Her career was in ruins, her friendships destroyed. She was horrified. Was this really her fate? The more she read, the more she felt trapped. The book had promised her knowledge, but it was turning her life into a nightmare. Every time she read someone's future, she saw a part of her own life slipping away. She had tried to control the book's power, but now it controlled her. One day, Maria decided she couldn't take it anymore. She knew that if she continued to read the book, it would ruin her and everyone around her. But she also knew that she couldn't simply throw it away. It was too powerful, and she feared someone else might find it and suffer the same fate. In her heart, Maria understood that there was only one way to escape the book's power. She would have to make a choice. Either find a way to destroy the book forever or live with the terrible knowledge it contained. It was a choice she wasn't ready to make, but she knew time was running out. The book's influence was growing stronger, and soon she might lose the ability to make that choice at all. As she closed the book one last time, Maria took a deep breath and looked around her empty apartment. She realized she was standing at a crossroads, and whichever path she chose, her life would never be the same. Part 3: The Descent. As the days turned into months, Maria became consumed by the book's dark grip. She tried to ignore it, locking it away in a drawer, but the knowledge of its power lingered in her mind. It was like a silent whisper, drawing her back. She had ruined James's life, driven Mr. Reed to quit, and changed countless other lives for the worse. She felt both trapped and responsible, unsure how to escape this cycle of harm. One evening, Maria was working late at the office when a young intern, Rachel, approached her. Rachel was bright, ambitious, and reminded Maria of herself when she first began her career in journalism. Rachel looked at Maria with respect and admiration, asking for career advice. Maria wanted to be honest, to tell her that the path wasn't easy, that it was filled with difficult choices and moral dilemmas. But all she could think of was the book. Her heart sank as she imagined Rachel's bright future twisted by the book's curse. Unable to resist any longer, Maria gave in. She waited until she was alone, then took the book from her desk and opened it to Rachel's page. Rachel's future was one of promise. She would become an award-winning journalist, known for uncovering stories that mattered. Her work would make a difference, bringing justice to the overlooked and inspiring change. Maria felt a pang of jealousy, wishing she could be as hopeful about her own life. But then, as she read more, the warning at the bottom loomed once again. Every time you read someone's future, their story will change. Maria's hand trembled, and she quickly closed the book. She told herself that maybe, just maybe, the curse wouldn't affect Rachel's future if she only read a small portion. She wanted to believe that by not reading too much, she could prevent any harm. But in her heart, she knew it was a lie. In the following days, Rachel's life took an unexpected turn. She seemed more stressed, less confident. Her once brilliant smile became forced, and she began making small mistakes in her work. Rumors spread that she was underperforming, and her enthusiasm seemed to fade. Maria watched in silence, feeling as if she were watching a beautiful painting being ruined by careless strokes. It was then that Maria realized she couldn't go on like this. She was destroying lives, one by one, all because of her curiosity and the book's influence. She had to find a way to break free, to stop this endless chain of suffering. In desperation, Maria decided to visit a local historian who specialized in rare books and occult artifacts. If anyone could understand what this book was and how to destroy it, he would. She met him at a quiet, dusty bookstore late one night, bringing the book wrapped in an old scarf to avoid anyone seeing it. The historian, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Wallace, took the book from her hands carefully. He examined it with a look of both fascination and caution, as if sensing the dark power it held. "Do you have any idea how dangerous this is?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Books like this aren't meant to be read. They're meant to stay hidden." Maria nodded, swallowing hard. "I didn't realize. I thought I could control it." "No one can control something like this," he said, shaking his head. "You say it predicts the future, but each time you read, it changes lives for the worse?" "Yes," Maria said, her voice cracking. "And now I don't know how to stop it." Mr. Wallace looked at her with a mix of sympathy and fear. "There are stories, legends about books that contain people's lives, their futures. But they're always hidden away or destroyed because they twist reality itself. If you want to escape, you have to get rid of it." "But how?" Maria asked, her voice desperate. "If I throw it away, someone else might find it. I need to destroy it." Mr. Wallace thought for a moment, his face grave. "Destroying a book like this isn't easy. It's bound by dark magic, the kind that's tied to people's destinies. Burning it, tearing it apart. Those things may not work. What can I do then?" Maria whispered, feeling hopeless. "There is one way," he said carefully, his voice barely audible. "But it's dangerous. You have to confront your own story, Maria. You have to find your own page in that book and rewrite your own future. Only then might you have the power to break its curse." Maria felt a chill run through her. Rewrite her future? She didn't even know what her current fate looked like, only that it was dark and lonely. But the thought of changing her destiny, of escaping the book's hold, filled her with a strange mix of fear and hope. It was a risky plan, but it seemed like her only chance. That night, back in her apartment, Maria sat alone with the book. She opened it to her page, feeling a shiver as she saw her name written there. Her hands trembled as she read her future once more. A story filled with regret, isolation, and emptiness. She was doomed to live in the shadows, always watching others suffer because of her choices. But if she could change it, if she could rewrite her future, maybe she could break free. With a deep breath, Maria took a pen and hovered over the words on the page. Her heart raced as she thought of what she wanted: freedom, peace, a chance to undo the harm she had caused. She began to write, her hand shaking as she altered her fate, choosing words that would lead her to a new path. As she wrote, she felt a strange sensation, as if the book was resisting her changes. The words she wrote faded in and out, as if struggling against an invisible force. But Maria pushed through, determined to make a difference. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she closed the book. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but she also sensed a deep exhaustion. She had rewritten her story, but she didn't know if it would be enough to end the curse. In the days that followed, something strange happened. James seemed to regain his old confidence, and Rachel's smile returned, bright and full of hope. The dark changes she had brought into their lives seemed to fade, replaced by the brightness of their original futures. Maria felt a surge of relief, hoping that the curse had been broken, that she had freed them, and herself, from the book's terrible grip. But the book itself was gone. She searched her apartment, turning everything upside down, but it had vanished without a trace. It was as if it had dissolved into thin air, leaving no sign it had ever existed. Maria felt both relief and unease. She was free, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the book was still out there, waiting for someone else to find it. She prayed that whoever found it next would be stronger than she had been, that they wouldn't be tempted by its power. In the quiet of her apartment, Maria finally felt a sense of peace, a feeling that her life could go back to normal. But deep down, she knew that some doors, once opened, never truly close. Part 4, the final chapter. Months passed, and Maria began to rebuild her life. Without the weight of the book and its dark power hanging over her, she felt lighter, freer. She returned to her work, not as a relentless investigator, but as a journalist who cared about the people behind each story. She learned to focus on stories that could inspire change, leaving the darker ones behind. She hoped this was the beginning of her redemption. One evening, she received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Wallace, the historian she had confided in about the book. "Maria," he began, his voice steady but urgent, "we need to talk. I believe the book may have resurfaced." Her heart skipped a beat. She thought she was done with it, that it had disappeared for good. "What do you mean? I haven't seen it since." "Well, since that night." "I know," he said, his voice solemn, "but I found it in my own study this morning on my desk, as if it had been waiting for me." A chill ran down Maria's spine. "But how? I thought it was destroyed or gone." "Books like this don't just disappear," Mr. Wallace replied, a tinge of fear in his voice. "They attach themselves to people, especially those who've already been affected by them. They look for souls they can influence, people they can control." Maria felt a sinking feeling. "So it's not finished with me?" "It seems not," he answered. "But there's something more, something I hadn't noticed before." I opened it, and there was a page about you, Maria. Your name was there, written in ink, like a new story. She took a shaky breath. "What did it say?" "It's not fully written yet, but it describes a choice you'll have to make. It seems the book is giving you a final chance to decide your own fate, or perhaps to end its power for good." Maria knew what this meant. She couldn't run from it any longer. "How can I make that choice? How do I know what the right decision is?" Mr. Wallace paused. "You'll need to face the truth about why the book came to you. The answer lies in why you were so drawn to it in the first place." After the call, Maria sat in silence, trying to process Mr. Wallace's words. She knew that this was a test, one final encounter with the book to put an end to its curse or remain its prisoner forever. That night, she dreamed of the book. In her dream, it sat open on a dark, endless plain, surrounded by shadows. She approached it, her heart pounding, and as she reached out to touch it, the pages flipped on their own. They showed her face after face, people she had read about, people she had hurt, and people she hadn't even met yet. It was as if the book were taunting her, reminding her of the lives it controlled. The last page showed her own reflection, older, weary, and alone. Her future self looked back at her with sadness, a warning in her eyes. Maria woke up drenched in sweat, her mind racing. The following day, she went to Mr. Wallace's study. He welcomed her inside and led her to a small wooden desk. And there it was, the book, resting quietly, as if it were waiting for her. Maria took a deep breath and opened it, finding her own page. Her heart ached as she read the words, detailing a life filled with fear, regret, and isolation. She realized that this was what the book wanted, for her to remain its captive, a silent observer who never dared to break free. Then, Maria understood what she had to do. She picked up a pen, her hands steady as she began to write. This time, she didn't just rewrite her own future. She wrote an ending to the book itself. She wrote words of freedom, words that shattered its hold over her and anyone else who would come across it. As she finished the last line, a strange warmth filled the room. The book's pages began to turn on their own, faster and faster, as if a strong wind had picked up inside the study. Mr. Wallace watched in awe as a golden light emanated from the book, filling the room with an intense glow. The pages turned to ash, disintegrating one by one, until nothing remained but a pile of dust. It was over. The book was gone, its curse lifted. Maria felt an overwhelming sense of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted from her soul. She had won. Mr. Wallace looked at her, a gentle smile on his face. "You did it, Maria. You broke the cycle." Maria nodded, feeling a tear slip down her cheek. "It's finally over." In the months that followed, Maria's life began to shift in ways she had never imagined. She continued her work with a newfound sense of purpose, helping others, uncovering the truth, and bringing light to people's lives. She no longer felt the need to look into other people's futures. Instead, she focused on the present, living each day with intention. And every now and then, when she thought about the book, she remembered the lesson it had taught her. She had learned that life's true power came not from knowing the future, but from the choices she made in the present.